word why. What a curious word. The kind of word that can make us cringe, feel defensive, or even distant. But you know, sometimes why is the key. A key that can unlock so much to our lives. Join me as we explore the why with fascinating contributors to the world. Those that entertain us, inform us, teach us about life, and if we're lucky, inspire the next in all of us. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and welcome to Headroom, a production of Rainlight and co-produced by Old Soul. Let's go.
Looking forward to this conversation, and if it's anything like what we were just discussing off air, I think it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for the audience to learn about not just what being an entrepreneur is and when it starts. And I think it starts really early, and we're learning that from so many young people and schools that are building entrepreneur programs, but how that impacts our perception of self and brand. And with that, I want to welcome in depth with Graham Bensinger, to the program. Graham, look, we talked off air about just some of the background of you and what you've been building over time. I want to start with this. So let's go deep right away. Tell me about your relationship with success.
Relationship with success. Something I strive for, something I have never felt like I've achieved personally. However, through the show, it's something I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to sit across from on a episode in, episode out sort of basis. We are lucky to have the chance to profile some of the most notable figures on the planet, whether that's, Tom Hanks or Richard Branson or Lewis Hamilton or, whoever it might be, these larger than life figures who have achieved a great deal of success in their own right. And, I pinch myself quite regularly, knowing that not only do we get the chance to travel to all these interesting places, but I get paid to sit across from uber successful people and just learn about their path to their position and highs and lows and lessons learned. It's a great treat.
Talk about the highs over the journey, right? So in doing prep, you've been doing this and pursuing this, the brand of what you're doing here in media since you were a young kid, right? Going to the ballpark early, wanting to get autographs, sort of wanting to get the behind the scenes access. I would imagine that the highs change over time, right? So in the beginning, I don't know, you tell me. There's that great clip of your dad talking about picking up the phone and it's OJ or it's Ernie Banks. Like what those highs are at the beginning of the journey where you've secured a guest and what it's like now, because, you have an incredible roster of people that you've talked to that at some point it becomes, I would imagine, not commonplace or expected, but people want to be associated with those who have influence. And so you've reached this, I think, level. And any entrepreneur, when they reach that level of success, do you have to remind yourself, like, how do you stay engaged and excited with that sort of youthful, exuberance that keeps people going?
First, there's always the excitement over the big get, whoever that might be. And it's still as much of a challenge as ever to get the right access to the right talent for one of these tapings because, while when I'm in 8th grade as a 14-year-old just starting out, the big get might be a 15-minute phone interview with, the Hall of Fame athlete. Now it's, might be traveling to the other end of the world to spend a few days with some A-list star. So the goalpost kind of changes over time. So I still get as excited as ever when it comes to getting the big get. Signing on a big advertiser or sponsor relationship, signing on a big distribution partner to carry the show. I really view my job as pretty much all sales, absent the preparation for the taping and the actual taping. I'm on the road probably 250 days a year for work. A very small portion of that, pandemic notwithstanding, is the taping travel. The rest is, meeting with, business partners. So whether it's trying to sign on a big distribution relationship or, add sales or book a big guest, that's kind of all sales. So, I get as kind of excited for the wins as ever before.
So how do you, what's the best label for you? You talked about sales. You're on camera talent. That probably doesn't do you justice in your ability to ask really good questions and thoughtful questions, and give people space. Like, you're not afraid of the pause, which I think is something that people who follow you, I think that they appreciate, which is you're a bit of a decanter, right? You let the wine breathe and then see how they respond. So what label do you feel most comfortable with? Or it's that old pair of jeans. Is it that you're a business owner? Is it that you are an editor of sorts, a content creator? Like, what makes the most sense for you at the end of the day?
I guess I kind of view myself as interviewer and entrepreneur. I've actually never really thought of it, but, any more than that. I mean, for me, really anything I've done to date's been more out of necessity for kind of next step than having charted any like clear cut path and having this kind of grand plan for the show. You were talking about kind of me getting an early start when I was, 8th grade, 14 years old. I think I was just super lucky that a childhood hobby and passion was able to turn into a career. And then, I get laid off early into my career and realize nobody's going to give me the type of opportunity that I was looking for. So just thought I'd see if I could try and figure out how to do it on my own. And then kind of lucked out that as I was doing that, the media landscape was changing. So there was more of a receptiveness to, that sort of thing. And so, that's, kind of it. I wish, there was more to it than that.
The sense of being uncomfortable in that space of, look, I think it's natural for humans. We want to put labels on people. We want to put things on a shelf, but you have to be a lot of things when you're an entrepreneur. What was that moment when you realized that you were an entrepreneur? I mean, your age and your generation is very interesting because you're right. This transition in media, right? We went from a world where SportsCenter was everything to then questioning whether it was the personalities, right? And we had Roy Firestone and Dick Schaap, right? And we had Keith and Dan. And was it them or was it the entity, right? Was it the mothership in that regard? And this huge sort of tectonic shift that you were right, sort of dead center in. Was there a moment when you said, wow, I'm on top, I'm riding the wave, I'm in the midst of this, and I kind of need to hit go?
When you're in it, you're just trying to have a moment to come up for air, let alone kind of look around and realize or recognize where you're at. So I don't think there was ever a time where I was conscious enough or had maybe even thought highly enough of myself to kind of consider or take a step back and actually consider myself that. It's always just kind of been more out of necessity. However, there were moments where I recognized, if I don't lean in here and figure out a way to invest more money, regardless of whether or not I have it, then I'm going to fail. You reach those kind of inflection points where, you're maxing all your time out. There's, no more hours you can physically put into something. You need to hire your first people. Then your staff is maxing their time out. Even if you don't have the budget for it, you need to figure out how to come up with, so there's these moments where if you don't grow, you're going to die. And I think I've been lucky that I've generally been able to recognize those and have made, not always the best decisions, but no catastrophic decisions so far to date. And I'd say kind of it's been more that for me.
Talk about, I know you mentioned that there was a point in time when you had taken out like $400,000 in a line of credit, and it was, you're at a fork in the road. Talk about that space and time, because I think for so many, look, I'm 45. When I was growing up, Graham, we didn't talk about being entrepreneurs. That was just not a part of it. It was, I grew up in Detroit. It was kids talking about their dads working for suppliers of the big three. It was still that kind of conversation. And yet now we have young people that right out of the gate, they're thinking about how many businesses they may or may not be a part of or start. And one of those elements is, what is your, in essence, pain threshold for when the stuff hits the fan and you're sitting there staring a debt right down the barrel of a gun. And I think a lot of times people will judge that, that fear of the fear in whether or not they're going to pursue being an entrepreneur. But almost every entrepreneur has gone through that. What was that like in the moment? How do you think about that now in retrospect? And what is a lesson that you sort of would, I guess, give along the way for those that are thinking about that?
Well, I think I had the benefit of being young enough that I didn't know any better. It's very easy to think about wanting to do something and having some general idea of the time perspective. But then when you're actually in it and, all of a sudden, this passion and hobby turns into a career, then the career is no more. And then you're trying to revive it by doing your own thing. And then your own thing becomes kind of all consuming where it's, every waking moment of the day, it's all you're doing. And then all of a sudden, not only have you invested all of your money and your life savings, but, severely in debt because you're all in and taking a loan out from the bank. Like at that moment, I wish I could say, yeah, I knew I had to do this, that, and the other, and I was, all in because I'm this, amazing entrepreneur. Like the reality is, you don't have a choice because if you don't do it, you're just going to screw up the rest of your life because you're going to be, destitute and financially crippled. So it's. You don't really, when you reach that point, you can give up, but it's kind of borderline devastating if you do that. So, I was benefited by not knowing any better. And then once you're in it, you just don't really have the choice. So I think the lesson I've learned to date is it was really important to me to try and put myself in a situation where time, investment, and results could have some correlation. Because in my prior roles, I got laid off of NBC Sports where I was doing digital work for them as, a 22-year-old at the height of the kind of Great Recession. It really didn't matter in my prior roles the metrics of the content I was creating. There were budget cuts, and to no fault of my own, I was out of a job. So I just wanted to try and be able to be in a situation where I could have control over the outcome. So that was kind of the biggest thing for me because I don't think I'm the best at having a boss or people that I answer to. Granted, still very much have a boss today because, we have distribution partners and sponsors and et cetera. So there are people that you're held accountable to, but it's, a little different structure. So, that was kind of the biggest thing for me, putting myself in a situation where I had more control over the outcome.
So maybe it was because you were young, but I am curious. When I talk to entrepreneurs off the record, right, whether they are interview subjects or neighbors or dads at soccer games, there's this notion that the minute that we sort of put ourselves out there publicly, and we just even, look, we're going to start X, that there's this pressure, this fear that we have that almost every time, like if you and I are seeing each other at the soccer field, right, and kids are playing, every time you run into me or someone that you've shared this news that you're starting a business, you almost feel that you have to share an update. Like that there's growth over time. And I've heard some incredible stories where people have, in essence, made up that they have a team, that they're building a team, and you really dig deeper, and that we is really an I. But this pressure that we all feel to show growth, and attainment of success as we're building it, right? Because we have the right idea. We've cracked the code, these sorts of things. What was that like along the way as you were going? I mean, I know you had some points of inflection where, you interviewed T.O. and that sort of blows up nationally, and you interview O.J. and then you're getting death threats. So you had some things that I think were really flags in the ground. But talk about that pressure to have that conversation where you could either share there were financial challenges or self-doubt. But how did you handle that? And did you have certain people that you shared everything with? Or did you have something right out of the gate you said, I'm keeping this to myself. It is just myself and my mind. And when I go to bed at night, I'll process that.
Yeah. Well, a couple things that come to mind. And I guess the biggest one was when I was transitioning from being, a hired hand. So, working for an outlet to being out of a job and then starting my own thing. During that time, in my early 20s, everybody kind of in my social circle thought I was a success because, I'd been on the Tonight Show and some other late night shows and had some interviews that got a lot of exposure. Meanwhile, I'm a college dropout. I left school after a year and a half because I was getting good work opportunities. All of a sudden, I have no job. I have no money, so I'm living in my old bedroom at my parents' house. And so there's this kind of perception on the outside that I'm this success. And, personally, I think I'm, anything but, and feel very much, like a failure, and realize that, like, if I don't figure out a solution to this, I'm going to need to go out and get a real job in, short order. The clock is ticking. So there was that, and that was kind of personally motivating for me and always made conversations socially kind of strange. And then, when you're in it and in some of those kind of toughest periods, I remember I didn't really have anybody to talk to about it. It was, you have your kind of close friends, but, in your social circle at that time, I mean, people are just coming out of college or going from college to grad school or college to entry-level jobs. And so there's not really anybody that you can identify or that I could identify with and share those experiences with. So, when stuff was at its worst, it's a kind of crippling feeling, both, mentally, physically, like you're all in, like it's, not fun, but there's, no other choice. I think if I had to do it again and I could change anything, it would be, having somebody that I could talk to about those experiences, because it would have helped me get through it. And now I think it's better because, you can just easily, I mean, granted, I could have gone to the library then and read books, but now you can just go on YouTube and type in whatever you're searching for and find somebody, talking to about that. Even, 12, 13 years ago when I was, or 10 years ago when I was doing it, there was kind of less of that content readily available at your fingertips. So, yeah, that's, I think, kind of what it was like for me.
Talk about managing that stress. How do you know, I think we're the best witness, right? We know when we are approaching a point of exhaustion, or in essence, we can't operate. We've got so many things going on as an entrepreneur. What is that like for you? Do you have is there some marker for you? Is there a Cliff Notes version of, man, this is my indicator that things are breaking down. I can't be everything to everybody, and I need to circle the wagons for myself.
Well, back then, I remember there was a moment, I was living in like a bedroom at, my parents had like a rental apartment, and they were letting me stay there rent free. And we had somebody cancel an episode taping on us, and I needed a new taping with it, like last minute, the night before we were supposed to fly out, and I needed a new taping within a few days of that to be able to have something produced in time for air that was even marginally decent. And, had no team. We're doing all freelancers. So, to find a new team of people on a couple days notice to fly somewhere, let alone find a new guest to book on a few days notice when you normally spend 100 hours preparing for something, a nightmare. And I remember kind of, for me, that was the moment where I was just like, sitting on a bed in this apartment, realizing like I can't, it was just like, that's my max. Like, you reach a point where you're just like, you can't like physically, give any more. I think it's moments like that though that help you, it like teach you like capacity, what you can handle. Yeah, I don't know, super valuable experiences to be able to go through that.
Building that resiliency.
Yeah, and then as you go through situations like that, more, on occasion over time, it then, at least for me, I think taught me to manage stress and pressure at least marginally better, whereas now, stuff that would normally whack me out completely, it's just, you have an easier time with, and I've kind of learned that's part of the game. And then over time, and you have a little more success, you then have more resources, so you were able to build a team to handle some of the crap as well, so you aren't, shouldering everything. And yeah.
Let's talk about brand. So I always find it interesting when a company is the person and their name, because we are in a world where brand is everything, right? You've got to be aware, I guess, of how you're represented, what you're aligned with, what you're associated with 24/7. At what point did you realize, I've got to take this very seriously? I can't just be the young, cute kid out there where people go, oh, that's so nice, right? He went to school with Costas' kid and he's just persistent, right? If you'd been doing that at 30, who knows what the response might have been. But at what point did you say, wow, I really need to think about this because my name is on the cover here, right? And there are implications to that as well, because I would imagine that you feel like you're in a fishbowl.
Yeah, I think, early on, it's very clear I was getting access to folks because, it's the novelty of a 14-year-old kid running around the locker room, or even
who has the guts to ask some deep questions, right?
Right, or even an 18 or 19 or early 20-year-old kid with audience size, with access disproportionate to audience size. But, it was kind of a very natural progression, I think, in terms of, it becomes increasingly obvious that you can't use, I'm a 5-year-old doing interviews is a selling point. Like, who cares? You're like everybody else. So there's that, and you begin to recognize, you're judged based on the quality of your work as opposed to, bullet points and, a pitch email in terms of being able to get access to, some of these larger than life figures or get on outlets that, give you big audience sizes. So I think there's like that piece of it. And then at an early age, I think I was always conscious of being careful about whatever you put out into the, digital ecosystem, because that's out there forever. And they probably give a lot of credit to my parents for that, who've been big influences, to me. But, whether it was, a picture from a party that you untag that gets posted on Facebook, or just always kind of being conscious of, what you put on Twitter, or, wherever. There's not a lot of, I think I was always operated under the thinking that there's not a lot of upside by posting anything that's even, borderline controversial or inflammatory, especially considering, you want to get access to people from all walks of life, regardless of what their beliefs or, political affiliations might be.
Headroom is produced by Old Soul, a one-stop marketing agency that understands the power of brand and nuance. Reach out to my guy Matt at Old Soul and supercharge your brand and content strategy. That's Old Soul. Shoot Matt a note at aoldsoul.com. That's AOLDSOUL.com. And now, back to our guest.
So talk about the transition, because when you were young, right, you're a teenager, you're just dressed like a teenager, and then all of a sudden you flip over into incredibly professional. So that to me seemed like a transition. Was that in depth? Was that when you kicked off the show? Like, that had to be a conscious, I think, choice to say, I want people to experience me this way, just like an Oprah might, or some, a Dan Patrick. So talk about that piece, because I would think that that's a part of it when you're conceiving of an audience that may or may not be interested in what you're building. There's an expectation. We want to know what we can get from Graham or anybody else that we watch or that we listen to. Talk about that, because that, to me, lends itself to how you're staging the interviews and what kinds of locations, lighting, the behind-the-scenes stuff. Like, it plays a huge role. I wouldn't imagine that was just by accident.
I think it was just by accident.
I was giving you more credit.
I mean, I didn't know the first thing about anything, and anything that I figured out was just based on people I had the opportunity to talk to in the production business or ad sales or distribution business, and any institutional knowledge I was able to gain that way. But it was, when this started, all I knew how to do was conduct a half-decent interview and book a guest, and that was about it. And so you just learn from trial and error and figure out kind of what you're comfortable with and what looks good and doesn't look good. And, then with reps and experience, you start to develop kind of mannerisms on camera and, all of that. But, I wish I could say I had any sort of plan. It was really...
You had people looking out for you, I guess, that were pointing you in the right direction.
I don't think pointing... I think there were a lot of people who took their time to give advice or to, sign on to be part of our team for wages that were below what they should be getting, who deserve a lot of credit. But I don't think there wasn't like any one person I went to for advice, but there were a lot of people that helped out a lot when they didn't need to. And, I think also any young entrepreneur, I would highly encourage to reach out to people in the business who you aspire to be like, because even if it takes a few messages or they don't respond, some will. And, those conversations go a long way in not only immediately helping, but then developing a network is important, and relationships are important, and whether or not they immediately benefit you or 10, 15 years down the line, at some point, knowing that person could stand to create an opportunity for you. And so there's only upside in doing that. And, a skill that I think is really not taught enough in our educational system is sales. It doesn't really matter what you want to do in life. Nobody's going to be a better salesman for yourself than you. And so I think it's really important that people learn how to do that, push themselves to get out of their comfort zone. Might not always work out, but it, is only beneficial to know how to do it.
Let's pivot and talk about the evolution of media. Now as we stand here, 2021, 2022, everybody can put a podcast out. Everybody can.
Everybody does.
Everybody does. Everybody has an opinion. They write something. They think everyone should be reading it and watching it. What's the impact on you and in depth, and how does that then play into what your larger goals are? Do you have to be that much more innovative in your mind? Is that something that builds in the necessary fear to sort of keep the coal in the locomotive going? Talk about just the changes that we've seen, because it's now a very, very crowded market.
Yeah. First, I have a very long way to get to where I'd like to be professionally and with the show. So I should say that from the outset. I definitely don't have all of the answers. I think my career, or at least hope my career, is very much in its infancy relative to my goals. I think it's a great thing that the barrier of, it's, low cost, easy barrier entry now. I think so often people have been unable to break into the industry because of various factors, money notably. Now, for a nominal cost, you can, develop an audience. It's hard, but having success in any industry is hard. It's like not rocket science. You work hard to create a quality product, and if you invest the time, you're going to develop your craft. And if you develop your craft and continue to invest the time, you're going to grow an audience. And, anybody can figure it out. So, I also think competition is good. We have far below the audience I'd love to have, but, I think with more people in the space, it's harder to develop an audience. But if you continue to work at it and you feel the competition and use it as motivation, then it's all, helpful tool. So I like it. And it's, it's hard, but, nothing's easy.
It doesn't scare you.
Want to do well at it. Yeah.
So talk about that. So you've said this a couple of times, that this is not you're not at the end, phase, right?
Sure.
So you're not a complete product in this way. So you're continuing to iterate. So where do you envision in-depth going? Is it just in-depth? Are there derivatives to that? Daily efforts where people get engaged with you? What do you envision as being a way to not only build audience, but potentially, I guess, opportunity in what you're doing?
I think long term, first and foremost, continuing to improve the quality of our product. Single most important thing. I think with that like to continue to build the audience size. As you improve the quality of the product, you can grow the audience size. As you grow the audience size, you have the resources to improve the quality of the product. So they do go hand in hand. I need to continue developing as a talent and interviewer. Long term, I'd like to continue to open the show up in terms of subject matter. So, right now we primarily feature athletes or people with some connection to sport. I would, very much like the show to be in a position where, 1 week we're having on President Obama, the week after that, Julia Roberts, the, week after that, some big name athlete, the week after that, Kanye West. To me, there's really no difference in interviewer or in interview, whether it's an athlete or somebody else. It's talking to successful people about their path and highs and lows and lessons learned, like we already discussed. So there's that piece, and then just continuing to evolve as media evolves. We have the linear product that airs on broadcast and cable. We have the digital product that is, YouTube and Facebook. We have the out-of-home taxi product, and we're, in the process of developing the streaming product, which obviously is where, everything's going in the OTT space. So that all is exciting to me. And, if we don't continue to evolve and grow, we're going to die. So it's as simple as that, but it's the game, and it's, kind of fun.
Talk to me. I'm going to make an assumption here that you've been, people have come to you with offers, right? So talk about the temptation to, and I think there's two sides to this coin. The temptation to leave what you're doing where you are the decision maker, right? Your name is on the plate. And thinking about whether it's the mothership or any other entity that says we've got to have Graham and his talent come to us because we're in the acquiring talent business kind of a thing. I would imagine you've had some opportunities here and there. What is that like to even, and if you haven't, even contemplate that? Because there's so much energy and effort. There are relationships that I think suffer when you're building your own business. I mean, you're traveling 250 days a year, and we haven't even talked about the personal side. I would imagine there's an exchange there, right? There's a transaction where you are giving up something for something else on the other end of it, right? And so talk about the temptation to, I guess, allow others to do it so you can breathe. Because I think every entrepreneur gets to that point, whether it's just sort of a rough Friday after a rough week, but that feeling of, gosh, I'm just exhausted, and maybe it would be nice to have someone else drive the train.
Yeah, difficult in it right now. I think to me it's less about if it impacts time investment, because I don't know that regardless of the situation, at least for me personally, it would impact kind of time investment. I think for me, a lot has to do with, will it improve and allow us to grow the quality of our product, the content. And then with that, can we maintain and grow, our team of people who, we have, I think 12 full-time folks now, with a couple more full-time. We'll probably be 15-ish, in the next, month or two, which still very small, but biggest we've, ever had in terms of full-time folks. And these are people that have, put in years of their, professional efforts towards kind of similarly growing and pursuing these goals of ours. So I think a lot has to do with that, and then also ensuring that we're in a position where we can minimize potential for downside, and never again be in a position where to no fault of our own, were out of a job. So, if you can kind of figure out those factors, whether continuing to be independent or, putting kind of not all your eggs in one basket, but, making one outlet the driving force, those are kind of the factors that I weigh.
So reading between the lines in your body language, I'm going to make some guesses or some thoughts here, and you tell me fair or foul, but my sense of you is that there's a great sense of responsibility. This is not just the Graham Bensinger show or company in this regard. You care very deeply about the people that have supported you along the way. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, whether they're running a business that is in the public domain or not, right, they're behind the scenes, there are those times where you say, man, just on its surface, this would be a great decision for me, right? But I don't know if it's a great decision for those that are with me. Right. And the struggle, because that's a very hard thing to share or discuss. Am I picking that up correctly? I mean, I can sense it from you, and it's not that Zoom is in this, sort of 3D realm where I can but I get this sense from you that there's so much more than just the show, the product, and what you want to do going forward. There are human beings tied to these decisions, right. And that is really the driving force.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're in season 12 or year 12 of the show now. The first very many seasons, I think I was pretty dismissive of others' efforts. Less out of intention and more just out of lack of consciousness, because you have your head down, you're overwhelmed, just trying to, you can barely figure out right from wrong yourself, let alone, take the time to give, attaboys to, people that you're working with. Completely wrong, but, unintentional. Over time, you realize, I think more because you're just forced to, because, you aren't doing the things necessary to build a team. So people, leave you, and you, ask why, and, you understand you can't do everything yourself. You just learn to kind of appreciate and respect, others for what they bring to the table, because it is truly a team effort. I'm a key part of it, but only part of it. And so it's hard building a good team. I think we have, I know we have the best team we've ever had before. And, it can go away quickly. I've lost, many years back, a lot of people before, and, it can be devastating. So when, you recognize that you're in that fortunate of a position to have a great team, you want to do whatever you can to kind of maintain that, one, selfishly, but then two, you over time, to your point, recognize that, it's a responsibility, and one you should not take for granted, aside from the fact that, people have, mortgages and, spouses and kids and,
Is it okay to be selfish as an entrepreneur? Is there some level of expectation even from employees, just in general, not just you, where, if I'm working for you, I kind of want you to be a little bit selfish because it's gotten us to this point. I mean, it does feel like it is a fine line to thread that needle.
I don't think people necessarily expect it. I think they might grow to accept it. I think I would assume it's hard for anybody coming from a different job where they have, a typical boss who, wasn't running the company and was, hired, and, everybody's jobs don't depend on that boss meeting, certain financial goals where everything's riding on kind of their shoulders. So, I think oftentimes it's probably unfair for the person that you've hired to be in that situation where more attention isn't paid to kind of their day in, day out duties. But, when you have a small team and tight budgets, especially early on, you're just trying to do what you can to, keep the lights on. And it's not in any way a reflection of, what this person or that person who works under you is or isn't doing. You're just trying to, stay afloat.
All right. So as we are now in the fourth quarter of our discussion here, let's go a little bit lighter. So my 9-year-old Heath Berger wants to be a sportscaster. And so I was telling you off air, he wanted me to ask you, what interview got away? What's the one that sticks in your craw? That you're okay saying, Paul.
Well, I'm not going to give the name right here, but I have one where, we're in it right now where, we've done, a taping with, this person and, they've decided they don't want to do the rest of it for reasons that, really make no sense. But, everybody has their reasons. And so, there's always something. And I think, one of the challenges that you have to grow to enjoy in order to continue in a role like this is to, be able to deal with kind of the unexpected and different personalities and catering to egos and, last minute requests that blow everything up. But I've had ones before where, people get up from the interview because they think like my facts are wrong, where then they'll like actually double check it and realize we were right and then sit back down. But, ultimately, whenever there are problems, at the end of the day, it's my responsibility and my fault. It's, my job as an interviewer to make the person comfortable. And, I'm going in oftentimes hoping, or some cases arrogantly expecting to be able to ask the person about the deepest, darkest moments of their life. And so, it's on me to make them and make their reps comfortable. Otherwise, I'm not doing their job. So generally where there are issues, it's my failures and, nobody else's.
So you had the guts, the chutzpah, whatever you want to call it. I mean, watching that clip of you and OJ when you were much younger, and you're asking him, in essence, what is it like to be the OJ Simpson, the murderer, like that label, right? And he just kind of bristles at that. And I thought, I don't know where that came from. Is that like the young kid that starts gymnastics that doesn't realize they're flipping around and could absolutely maim themselves? And you go, they're just too young to know any better. Like, was that the start of being able to ask questions that people might be thinking, but they never would have the guts to ask, that sort of set you on your course as to how people understood what it would be like to sit down with you?
I think when you're younger, a little less aware of what's socially acceptable. And, I think something that I've had to figure out as I've gotten a little older is how to kind of ask some of those questions that I want to ask without fear of what is or isn't, socially acceptable. So, some of the questions when I was younger, one, I didn't know any better. That's not to say I wasn't nervous, because I was way more nervous when I was younger than I ever am now. I would get nervous when I was asking something about a topic that I knew was sensitive, even if I had less of a filter. a few questions before I knew I was going to ask it, I'd start feeling, my heart, pounding, where you can barely focus on the conversation at hand because you're already thinking about what's going to happen, in a few questions. I will still, to this day, when I know something very sensitive is coming, have those thoughts start to creep into my head. But, I also feel like with sensitive subject matter, oftentimes, first, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt more often than not if you really do your homework and you come prepared, because most people do not. And then tonality, inflection, how you lead into a subject, goes a really, really long way. You can get away with a lot with questions if you, approach it in a non-threatening way. And so, I probably learned the most from the situations where I have not gotten the benefit of the doubt, where, I've pissed people off with the question. They're hard to look back on, and sometimes I don't even, because it is so vivid in my mind, those situations where I screw up. But most commonly it's because I didn't lead into it the right way. So I think over time, those experiences have helped a lot with, future interviews.
When's the last time you sat down for an interview, and even though you did your 100 hours of prep, you had to remind yourself to be professional because you were excited to be in their presence, you have been a fan of theirs? Like, how do you separate? I think we've come a long way in fandom, right? Used to, you could never do that in broadcast journalism. You just didn't know people's affiliations. And now, if you don't, it seems a little bit odd. So when's the last time when you sat down thinking, I've got to maintain center here because, this could be a terrible interview, one that I might really enjoy over a beer, but the audience isn't going to like?
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks, yeah.
I think it was like a year ago. I mean, it's Tom Hanks, I was able to track down his email address, and we were emailing off and on for like 4 years. And it went from, him not responding to getting a response every once in a while to we had it scheduled a couple times, then rescheduled a couple times, then canceled a couple times, and then, finally it was happening. And so there's all the legwork that, went into it, aside from the fact that, he's one of the greatest actors
Tom Hanks
of all time. Yeah. I mean, like Tom Hanks. So, and he was like into it. We were supposed to, he was willing to give us an hour and a half, which I was floored by. Then he ends up giving us almost 3 hours because, he was just appreciating the fact that we'd done our homework and asking stuff he hadn't been asked about a million times before. So, there are, every once in a while you have those. It's certainly the exception as opposed to the norm, but those are also, some of the most fun experiences as well.
Would you say are you living your dream out when you think back at the young kid that would get baseball signed and these sorts of things? Like, you wouldn't have known it then, but do you feel like you are actively engaged in the dream that you have built?
Look, I think I always thought I'd be farther along than I am right now, but I think, I'm very conscious of how lucky I am to be in this position and doing the only thing that I've ever wanted to do, since high school, and having a team of people and a team of partners and a family that, believes in me and supports me in that endeavor. Feel super, super lucky. And, admittedly, and this is no joke, at some point every day I'm like, I just think to myself how incredibly fortunate I am. So, yeah.
I'll close with this. What's it like to be interviewed yourself? I mean, you're the one with the playbook typically, and here I am, the offensive coordinator today with my questions and prep on you.
I mean, actually, this is fun because most of the interviews that I've ever done have just been more, about who we're interviewing or, rarely do they ever go in this direction. And to the extent they do, it's only kind of momentary as opposed to extensive. So, and you've clearly, spent time doing your research, which it makes it enjoyable and fun. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we want to thank Graham Bensinger. You can check out In Depth. Where can everybody go? I want to make sure, I know for me, I'll let the audience know. I'm the Facebook guy that, I close my night listening to podcasts all the time and I watch Facebook clips. So I get all your stuff in my 3 to 5 minutes, and then I'll mark it and then I'll watch it later on YouTube. But where can people go?
I mean, the one destination they can go to find out where all of our content is on all of our platforms is grahambensinger.com. Then the next platform, the easiest one that I encourage people to go to is our YouTube channel. They can just search Graham Bensinger, as that has all of our archived content over the years as well. So those would be the two places. And again, you can see us weekly on TV, digital, podcast, etc. But grahambensinger.com is the best place for that.
Well, keep crushing it. I think the entrepreneur audience is going to learn a lot just in what it's like, and whether we are starting a shoe company or a multimedia company or a consulting company. I think understanding brand and our own place in that ecosystem is important. And Graham has done a very eloquent job of laying out just his experience and his journey. I think we're all the better for it. Once again, I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger.
Thanks for taking the plunge into Headroom, where we uncover the why behind the what and who impacting our lives. Headroom is a production of Rainlight and co-produced by our friends at Old Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and this is Headroom.